Good afternoon. This is Jenny Gee coming to you on a Friday afternoon to talk to you about a little bit about what's going on out in this beautiful world we live in. So today I want to talk to you about my evergreen tree, because it's doing something that I'm not used to seeing it do. Maybe it's happening in your yard too, and I've been trying to look it up online just to figure out an answer, and maybe somebody out there knows why, but here we go. I'm going to kind of go from the beginning and just talk to you a little bit about this tree. So we planted this tree the first Christmas we were in this house, which will be it's 29 years this coming Christmas. So tree is, older than that, because it wasn't real big, but it's very big now. And it's always a funny shaped tree. It's definitely not triangle like we think of pines maybe being, but I can crawl out from underneath it later and kind of show you the shape of it. It's never been able to decide who's the leader, and so it just waves and swings and has different length branches at the top all over the place. But it gets really heavy at the bottom, and we like to be able to mow a little bit, even though with the pine needles down it doesn't have a lot of grass, but where the grass comes up to it, you couldn't get to that. So we've limbed it up a little bit at the bottom just to kind of make it a little airier and open, and that's why I'm underneath it. So I'm gonna come in, I think, like this. Oh, I'm gonna take a seat and show you. I gotta take my glasses off so I can see. Okay, so this is one of the spots that we had limbed up, and you can see here this little drip. I don't know if I'm in focus very well. Hi, Craig. But you can see this little drip here, and that's just a little bit of like sap that's coming out of the tree when it was limbed up. And you can see another little drip like right here. I'm getting in on that. I don't know if I'm focused very well. We're right there. So it's kind of drippy, and that happens especially with pines, as they have like maybe a little bit of damage done, a tree branch cut, an insect infestation that is happening, and they're breaking through the bark, and then that sap starts to flow out, and it's very sticky. And it acts like in the same way that if we were to cut ourselves and then we bleed a little bit and we scab up, that's what this is doing. And we did this last year, this cut, but it just kind of scabbed up and protected the tree. And so that's really kind of cool. And evergreens are really interesting in general, whether you have pines or hemlocks or spruces or whatever it is that's in your yard. You know that they hold on to their leaves throughout the wintertime. And a deciduous tree can't do that. Now, maples and oaks and tulip trees and things like that, they have to drop their leaves because, if the snow was to land on those leaves, the heaviness of it, the fact that they would dry out very quickly in the cold wintertime weather, and without being able to take water up from the ground because the ground is frozen and all that. But pine trees or evergreen trees, I should say, are able to hold on to their needles because their needles are very, I'll just kind of flip this around here. The needles are very waxy. They're thin, so the snow, sometimes we see where the snow is really piled up right after a snow, but it tumbles off, and these needles are skinny, so they don't lose a lot of water. Okay. Now, let me see. I'm going to turn this around one more time. I'm going to crawl out. I'm being very, not very graceful here on this particular Friday Facebook, right? But I'm turning you back around again. So when you look at the needles up close, you can see just how thin they are. This is a white pine, so you can get out there and look at each of the bundles. Oh my goodness. The bundles have 1, 2, 3, 4, that particular bundle. White pines have 4 or 5 needles per bundle. And I always remember that by the fact that white has 5 letters in it, and then red pines have 2 and 3, and so red has 3. Makes it easy. And they're also very, very soft and not pinchy, so they're pretty cool. So pine trees. All right, I'm going to get to my big question in 1 minute. I just wanted to, one other thing I want to talk about, and wrong season for it kind of, but we have in the springtime, and I remember this when we were on a spring break one time down in South Carolina, and just every morning the car was completely coated in that greenish yellow powder of pine pollen. So yes, pine trees produce 2 different kinds of cones. When we think of like, and I'm just talking about pines right now, but needle-bearing trees produce cones. So, but since this is a pine I'm looking at, I'll call it a pine cone, even though we even call spruce cones pine cones sometimes, just because it's our popular language, I think, part of our vernacular. But the cones that produce the pollen, generally speaking, are low in the tree, and there's a lot of them. And the wind blows and it carries all that pollen, and the cones that are higher in the tree have the female reproductive parts. They're the seed-bearing cones. So we have pollen-producing cones and seed-producing cones. And the pollen-producing cones are small, and they have all these little pollen packets in them, and those open up in the spring, and the breeze takes them. And the reason that they don't grow high up in the tree as much is because that would allow for them to just tumble their pollen out, and then one tree self-pollinating itself, which is never the healthiest, strongest thing in nature. So we have low pollen-producing cones. Wind is sweeping their pollen across everything, and they're landing higher in trees, further away. And then they land on those seed-producing cones. I always have some kind of noise that joins me. They land on those seed-producing cones, and then the whole process takes place. So I have something under here I want to show you. Once the seed-producing cone receives its pollen, it begins to grow. It starts out smaller, it stays closed up, and inside each of these scales, there's a little seed that's developing, and it stays closed. And if you look early on, and for pines it can take like 2 years, 3 years even for some evergreen trees to fully produce the seeds, but they stay closed, and they grow and they grow and they grow as the seeds inside grow. And then eventually the scales all open up, and the seed would lay right along one of these little wings, and it comes out, and it's almost like a mini maple helicopter. And then it opens up at the right time of year for it to drop on the ground and begin to grow a new tree. And you've probably heard stories of like the jack pines that only will open, they're so tightly closed up that the only way they open is the heat of a wildfire. But if you think about that, isn't that brilliant? Everything else is kind of gone now, right? The wildfire has swept through, the ground is clear, these cones pop open and their seeds come out, and what is going to be the main plant that takes over that landscape is the jack pine. So what a wonderful way to set the scene for that plant population to really flourish and take off, but to wait for, nature to clear the land for it. So God is so creative. But this is why I wanted to talk to you about these cones today. Again, here I am in all of my not being very graceful. But I noticed the other day that this year's cones are open, but they're dripping all this sap out of them. So the sap, like I was saying, is something that happens. What is the sap? The sap, all trees and all plants have sap. It carries the sugars and the nutrients through the tree. It's basically like we think of blood. The xylem carries the water and the minerals up from the soil the phloem carries all the sugars back out to the branches to help the tree to grow and to grow. And this sap is flowing through the xylem and the phloem. And that makes good sense. So when I cut a branch off a tree, it's going to exude out. But why are my cones exuding sap? And it's beautiful. It's like the way the sun is shining on them right now. They're really gorgeous. But I honestly don't ever remember it happening before. And so I'm wondering, and I don't have an answer. I'm wondering why this is happening. My tree's healthy, so I don't think there's any problem with that. Could it be that maybe if the cone produces this sticky sap, that critters are less likely to crawl on it and eat the seeds? Is it a way of protecting the seeds a little further? I don't know. And I looked a whole bunch of places today, and it doesn't seem that anybody has any real solid answers about it. So it's one of those wonderful things that we can just think of as a mystery, that God has created this process of plants doing what they do and surviving and being just in the best possible ways for themselves to grow and flourish and extend the population of itself. So, and it's not just that little bundle down low. I have quite a few clusters of cones, and the way that the sun is shining on them right now, they are all dripping sap out. And I don't know that you can see that quite as well, but hey, you can pop past my house and take a look, and maybe you have some answers for me as to why it's happening. I don't know, but I do love when mysterious and strange things happen in nature. So that is my wondering for today. I think the trees are amazing and just miracles right in front of us. And they do some things that are pretty mysterious and pretty amazing. So I hope you can get out today and enjoy this amazingly beautiful September day. Enjoy the blue sky and the sunshine, and it's just so warm and lovely, and there's so much going on and so much noise in the garden, and I'm gonna do some of my things that I can in my garden today without taking all the seeds away from the birds. So I will see you on Sunday. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Go out and enjoy all of the beauty of God's creation. Bye.